Welcome, welcome again, everyone. So lovely to be practicing with you. I know I say that every time, and it's really true for me to see your faces and to have this time together. It's always really sweet. So, for this evening, so this is the Tuesday tune-in, and this is only the second time that I've done the Tuesday tune-in in about a year because I was away, and it's a slightly different program than our other ones. So we'll have about half an hour or so of guided meditation, and then about half an hour of Dharma talk, and then the Q&A. Plenty of time for Q&A or reflections, concerns, corrections, all of the above. And but before that, just to make a couple of announcements. So Dharma en Español starting next week, Monday night. There was some confusion, both from San Francisco Zen Center side and our side about which day, but it's actually starting on Monday, 4-week class in Spanish. And the precept ceremony will be happening on November 24th. That's a Sunday. And Todd and Jesse have both completed all of their sewing. It's up here on the altar already, ready for them to calligraphy the Dharma names. So they'll receive their Dharma names as part of the ceremony on the 24th. And everyone's welcome to that. It's a hybrid event. And what else is happening? December 8th is the celebration of the Buddha's enlightenment. So we'll have probably a very brief ceremony offering and gratitude to the Buddha, and then brunch after the talk on the 8th. And that's about it. Art programs start in December for those who are interested in that. And I went ahead and decided that we didn't need to do any kind of registration for that. Those will be drop-in workshops. So just put it on your calendar and show up. And that's that, I think, for now. So we'll go ahead and begin the sit this evening. And I think what I'd like to do is to focus on the sense bases or the sense fields. And we won't do all 6 of them, but in half an hour we'll have a fair amount of time, probably get to at least 3 or 4 of them. And the only reason to let you know what kind of meditation we're doing before doing the actual guidance is just so that you have an opportunity to see for yourself whether you are able to follow the method or not, whether it feels like you're able to tune into that particular aspect of perception or not. So you can just have a look at that as we go along. And we'll begin by establishing our meditation posture. So whatever it is that helps you to relax the body and ease whatever tension can be released in this moment. And find a bit of balance. Letting the bones of the spine come into alignment. So they can carry the weight of the body. And perhaps the muscles can release and soften. Just noticing the body's stability. And its gentle movements also maintaining balance. Perhaps feeling the breath breathing the body and just allowing its natural rhythms to come and go. And now turning the attention to the sensations of touch in one foot. Either foot is fine. Just staying curious about the sensations of touch in the foot. Perhaps becoming aware that even when the foot is still, the sensations of touch are shifting, arising and ceasing. And now a shift to the sensations of seeing, visual sensations, whether the eyes are open or closed. There's some sensation that's received in the visual field. No need to strain at all, just resting attention on the visual sensations of the moment. And now another shift in attention, turning toward thoughts as sensations in the mind. Just like a smell or touch. How is it to just observe thoughts as arising sensations in the field of the mind? Observing mental activity as sensations. Ultimately, allowing the attention to receive the sensations in whatever order they come, rather than resting on one field of sense, just observing sense stimulation in whatever order it comes. aware of sensations coming from the sense fields, touch and taste and smells, sounds, sights, and thoughts. And in these last few moments of the meditation, just returning to the awareness of the body, checking in with the body's sense of balance or agitation, ease, or tightness. Just checking, how does it feel at this moment? right, friends. So that brings us to the next part of the program, which is the Dhamma talk. And if you have any reflections or questions about the meditation, we can come back to those at the end. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So I thought quite a bit about what I wanted to share this evening, and there are several themes that seem to keep connecting. So I'm going to try to talk about a few of them. And it's sparked a little bit by this question of intention in practice, intention, and the role of volition or the role of choice in what we do. As compared to perhaps some kind of unfolding that is happening outside of our control or outside of our choice. And I think that I've mentioned in some talks before that this question of volition in practice is one that people tend to go through various changes in their ideas about that based on their experiences. Sometimes they can have an experience that makes it feel like there's no choice and something just happens automatically, quote unquote. Or folks can have a sense of really making a decision and having it turn out, you know. And so what about all that? What about the question? And so I thought that actually it ties in kind of nicely because I thought, oh, what I'd really like to do at this point in the year is to talk about the 7 factors of awakening. And this time of year is particularly good for that, I believe, because, you know, we're going into this time of the holidays and there's a lot of, you know, activity and things happening. But then there's this kind of rolling into a quieter part of the year, perhaps. You know, the weather makes it so that we might want to stay indoors a little bit more. The you know, holiday activity of parties or whatever it is, family obligations, gift buying, etc., slows down. And we might go into a nice period where we have a window of time to look at a particular kind of phenomena. And I find for my own practice that that's very helpful, that to really say, okay, I'm going to try a particular form of meditation for a month or 2 months or 3 months, or I'm going to try to observe one particular kind of phenomena for a period of time like that, for the winter. has been tremendously helpful. Just to see again whether it's possible to see what are the conditions, the types of practice, the types of weather, the types of schedule of the day that make a difference or don't make a difference in my ability to perceive certain phenomena. And I say all of this also in the sort of bigger picture that I believe that one of the things that we are doing in practice is that we are becoming more and more willing and more able to observe different types of phenomena, to observe, to have different types of perception. And in order to begin to see what are the things that change, what are the things that are different about it, and what are the things that are true about all of our kinds of perception. And knowing that difference is critical, right? Because as I have said many times before, if you want to change the things that can be changed, like the content of your life, like the stories of your life, like the activities and so on, you can do that. That's not a problem. But if you want to change the principles that underlie the way that this mind and body work, the principles of reality, that is going to lead to a whole heck of a lot of difficulty. Right? That is where people experience tremendous suffering because of not being able to tell the difference between those two things. So on that note of telling the difference, so maybe there is a thread sort of weaving through here. There are these first two factors of the 7 factors of awakening that are helping us to sort of find our footing when it comes to perception. So just to say all of the 7 factors, so the 7 factors are mindfulness, investigation of states, investigation of dhammas, mindfulness, investigation, energy or effort, and then joy, always a good one, don't forget the joy, and then tranquility and sort of collectedness of mind or concentration of mind, and then equanimity. And so to talk about just these first two for a moment, and to talk about, again, this role of intention, choice, being able to tell the difference between the shifting nature of phenomena and the marks, you could say, or the principles that are always at work. We start out with mindfulness, right? So mindfulness is a very useful practice. In fact, there is a sutta in which the Buddha states categorically that mindfulness is always useful. He says there are certain awakening factors that are more useful when you're trying to calm the mind or the body, and there are certain awakening factors that are more useful when you're trying to energize the mind or the body, but mindfulness is always useful. And mindfulness, we could say, a very, very simple definition of mindfulness would be something like a receptive form of awareness of phenomena in the present moment without judgment. Just this kind of receptive attention right here, right now, without any kind of sorting it out, but just receiving, just being willing to receive what's here. So mindfulness has this very soft quality, if you will, right? This openness, this gentleness. But what's interesting about the way that the Buddha spoke about mindfulness when he talks about the efficacy of the practice, so to speak, is that he talks about mindfulness in this in this very powerful way. He says, so this is Samyutta Nikaya 4628, for those who are keeping track there. This is from the so-called connected or linked discourses. And it's a chapter on the 7 factors of awakening. So there are dozens and dozens of teachings about these 7 factors. But he says this, he says, a practitioner develops the enlightenment factor of mindfulness based on seclusion, dispassion, cessation, and maturing in release. So wow, already that sounds like very, very powerful kind of practice, right? Something that is helping us to, that matures or kind of ripens with release. And he says this also, he says, it's vast, exalted, measureless, and without ill will. And that particular grouping of adjectives is usually not associated with mindfulness in the suttas. That particular grouping of adjectives is usually associated with what we call the boundless qualities, like metta, like loving kindness and compassion. Those are the ways that he talks about those qualities. But here he's saying even mindfulness can be vast and exalted, meaning sort of like a higher state of mind. But then this is where we get to the powerful part. He says, a mind that has developed the enlightenment factor of mindfulness, with a mind that has developed the enlightenment factor of mindfulness, one penetrates and sunders the mass of greed, the mass of hatred, the mass of delusion, never before penetrated and never before sundered. So what does sundered mean? Sundered means to like cut apart, yeah? So it sounds like here, like mindfulness like a sword, right? Like whew, mindfulness that cuts through greed, hatred, and delusion, the 3 most powerful problems of humanity, according to the Buddha. Yeah? Very, very powerful practice. So interesting the way that he talks about it, right? Even though mindfulness is also quite simple in one way, right? We're just here. We're just receiving the moment. We're next, 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 you know, not even next, like this, right? This. But that isn't where we usually live. Oftentimes, right? We're off in some future worry, we're off in some rehashing some past thing that we haven't finished up with, or trying to wrap some concepts around what's happening to ourselves. Instead of just receiving what's here, right? So that's why we did this practice today, this meditation practice of doing what? Of just even tuning into what's happening in this body and mind. That's the 6 sense spaces, right? That's sense-based practice, is just saying, okay, like these are the doors, these are, you can, I sometimes imagine it, especially when we talk about the mind as a sense base, you know, as like like the skin on the top of a drum, right? And some contact happens, right? Some sound hits the ear, or some thought is known, and then there's that resonance, right? There's that sound. There's that stimulation in the mind. So we can get to know these minds and bodies in that way of being responsive, but also in the way of in the way that we use our attention. So the interesting part about the 7 factors of awakening, which does not get talked about often, is the Buddha says very clearly there are 2 precursors to even starting to work on establishing the factors of awakening. So precursors to mindfulness would be having good friends, good spiritual friends, very important, right? Having good folks to hang around with, exactly. Right? You know, look around, here we are, our good spiritual friends. And also he says, the second one is, oh gosh, now it has totally escaped me. So now I have to actually go look at the one where he says, it's good spiritual friends, and it is careful attention. Being able to develop careful attention. So those are the two precursor factors to the enlightenment factors. Yeah? And so, and this is why I think sometimes when people start in practice, they can get a little bit frustrated because they're like, I can't even do mindfulness, right? I can't even do mindfulness. And why? Because they haven't learned yet how to establish, I'm just double checking, yes, careful attention. So 12 and 13 in the same chapter, again, for folks who are keeping track. We are training, we have to train the mind to be able to place our attention. Have you noticed that? Right? That's what you're doing a lot of times in your meditation. You're like, okay, I want to listen, I want to feel the sensation of the breath. And then da 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 da, right? And oh wait, put that attention back where it goes, right? Ah, right. And we learn how to place it, and we learn how to place it, and we learn how to place it in more and more detail, in more and more ability to persist over time, right? In less and less reactivity, right? We can start to observe things that we weren't willing to pay our attention to before, because we have started to establish a little bit of this quality of knowing, oh yeah, no, I can watch this, I can be with this. This doesn't have to knock me off my cushion. So we have this quality of mindfulness that is very powerful, that has, as it supports the good friendship and the quality of attention, of where we put our attention with care. And so that also has, goes on to the next part. So the second one, and this is where the volition really becomes even more critical. And why I think that, the Buddha was so brilliant at describing these phenomena in different ways that ultimately are all related, of course, because he's pointing at the same reality. So this quality, this second factor of awakening, right, is investigation of dhammas. So dhammas in this case means phenomena or things or stuff or qualities. It's a general thing, a general things. Okay, so then we see, so what's the difference, right? If mindfulness meant that we were paying attention to the thing, then what is the difference between that and investigation of dhammas? So then when the Buddha speaks about this, he speaks about discernment. He says, there are wholesome states and unwholesome states. There are so-called bright states and dark states. Literally in the mind, you can experience this actually for yourselves, right? Dark and bright states, but also kind of figuratively, right? We can be in a dark mood or a bright mood. Yeah. And this quality of discernment is the investigation, right? So by definition then, if you understand that, then you understand that the investigation of dhammas requires a little bit more attention and a little bit more intention, because you have to be able to compare one state to another. You have to be able to actually be present for more than one state, right? Mindfulness only asks you to be present for one state. This is mindfulness. This, got it, received. But investigation of Dhamma says no. Received what, right? Cold or hot? Bright or dark? And why? Because this mm, it has to do with the way that karma works, right? So when we think about the way, so karma is a function that's happening that's kind of set off by intention. So when we have the intention to make a clear discernment between what's wholesome and what's unwholesome, or what's bright and what's dark, then we are activating some karma there. And in particular, a good karma, a spiritually good karma, according to the Buddha. That kind of ability to investigate the mind and be able to tell what's going on there, because it gives you more choice, right? But not only the choice, because then, okay, hopefully the choices would be better. The choices would follow through according to what was more wholesome and what was more bright and what was leading you forward on the path. But even before the choice part, the karmic benefit of doing that very activity is already waking you up. Do you see? It's already engaging karma because it is an intentional, wholesome act. Yeah. In fact, there is a sutta, I don't have it in front of me today, but there is a sutta that we were reading in the Sutta Contemplation a few weeks back. And the Buddha says that very clearly. He says, oh, and then they're going and they're doing this kind of practice and this kind of practice and this kind of practice. And while that's happening, they're waking up, right? So think about that for a moment. It means that um, it's not like building the house and then moving into the house, right? Enlightenment isn't moving into the house at the end. Enlightenment is this process of becoming so thoroughly intimate with intention and the value of intention and the use of this mind in order to understand karma, right? And that's the beauty of being a human being, that we can reflect on ourselves. Our minds can reflect on themselves. And if we do that in a skillful way, then we are waking up. Right there. We're waking up. We're on the path, walking the path. And this is why I always tell people, like, don't worry where you are on the arc of practice, you know? The arc of practice is just, it's kind of unfathomable. It's kind of unfathomable. And it's not unfathomable because of the things that are out of our control, actually. Those things are happening and the conditions need to all kind of click, and all of that is true. But it's unfathomable because we cannot really understand how beautifully these effects unfold. You know, there's another sutta in which the Buddha says, if you practice metta thoroughly, very well, you fill your mind and heart with metta, loving kindness, that's 16 times more powerful than the next best thing. And when I first heard that, I laughed. I was like, where is 16? Where does that number come from? Right? But it was because of that. It was because oops, we have a little echo going on here. It was because I underestimated the karmic resonance that comes out of that. Filling your whole mind with metta. If the mind is boundless, if the quality itself is boundless, wow, of course, 16 is probably a small number. 16 million times maybe. Right? If you could really do that and live from that place. So the investigation of Dhammas is the intention, but it is, and this again is why I think it's so beautiful that what the Buddha is telling us over and over again in so many different ways is how we can make choices in our lives, do certain activities such that we bring ourselves into alignment with the qualities of reality and begin to see them. Oh, look, there it is. Oh, look, there it is. I do this positive, wholesome karma thing with intention, and then it has its rollout, so to speak. And that's happening right in front of our eyes over and over and over again. And the Buddha is just saying, right, just get in line with that and it will all, right? And it's not that it will all just automatically happen. It's that we begin to understand ourselves as that thing, right? We begin to see that this thing works according to that. This thing, this body, this mind, right? So, and it is also for this reason that the Dhamma is incredibly, so these are my notes for today. You see this, eight words of notes for a talk that's probably more complicated, much more complicated than the type I usually give. But I do want to conclude by saying, ironically, that when we really understand this, then the practice is incredibly simple. Incredibly simple. So many of you have heard me tell the story of Bahia. Bahia was known as the Bahia of the bark robes. He was a spiritual seeker in India at the time of the Buddha. He had renounced clothing even. He just wore bark as his clothing. And he was known as someone who lived near the sea. I don't know why that was important, but that's something that's been remembered about him. But he was still a recluse, and he was somebody who was very well respected, actually, as a practitioner. But so this is a story that's told not in the suttas, in what we call the Khuddaka Nikaya, the minor discourses, and it's from the Udana. And this is Udana 110, Bahia's story. It's a very famous story because it is so incisive, I think. But anyway, long story short, Bahia was, according to the sutta, respected, revered, honored, venerated, and given homage. He had obtained the requisites of robes, although again, he was wearing bark cloth. He wasn't wearing like fancy robes. He was wearing cloth made out of tree bark. But food, lodging, medicines, like people took care of him so that he could be a spiritual teacher and a spiritual seeker. But then as the sutta goes, he's meditating one day and he's asking himself, he says, oh, I think I'm getting close to awakening. I think I'm getting pretty close to enlightenment. And his dead relative, so you might think of this as being visited like by the ghost of one of your cousins or something. His dead relative approaches him in his mind and says, no, Bahia, you are not on the path of awakening. You're not anywhere near being an arahant. But if you want to be, you should go visit this man called the Buddha, and he's staying over there. So Bahia was, sincere. He was absolutely sincere. And so he goes and he approaches the Buddha. But the Buddha's on alms round. The Buddha's in town collecting his meal for the day. So that's not a time that you mess with people because, the families, people are there with the food. They want to have an interaction with the Buddha. All of the monks would be in line kind of waiting there. And, you don't want to mess up the meal. That would be impolite. But Bahia doesn't. He's a go-getter. He's very, very adamant. And he approaches the Buddha and he says, please give me a teaching. And the Buddha says, no, not right now, Bahia. This is, we're in the middle of alms round. It's not a good time. And then Bahia says, no, but you never know when you're going to die, you know? So you really need to give me a teaching now because one never knows when one is going to die. And this, of course, would resonate totally with the Buddha, right? The Buddha's always saying that one never knows when one's going to die. But the Buddha, nonetheless, he says, no, we're in the middle of alms round, no. But then Bahia knows the trick, right? The Buddha will answer if he's asked 3 times. So he asks the 3rd time, and he says, please, you never know, and I really need a teaching right now. So the Buddha says, okay, I'm going to give you a teaching, a short one. So he gives him a very pithy teaching, right? And I'm going to read it to you, even though it's very, very short, but I'm going to read it to you because it's very good to hear directly. He says, Bahia, you should train yourself thus, okay? Train yourself in this way. So keeping in mind, right, that he's saying training, right? This is something an activity you're going to do. He's not saying just wait for, heaven to open up, right? It's intention. You train yourself thus. In the seen, there will be only the seen. In the heard, there will be only the heard. In the sensed, there will be only what is sensed. And in the cognized, in the thought, in the known, there will be merely what is known. You should train yourself in this way. And when you do that, you will see that there will not be you within that, or you outside of that, or you in the middle of that. You will be neither here nor beyond nor in between, and just this is the end of suffering. Right? So what does he say? He says, investigate, right? Investigate and see those things clearly, so clearly that there's nothing else in the way. There's no other judgment about it. There's no other anything overlaid on top of it. And then when you see that, then you see that what we mean by non-self, right? You see that this thing is just a flow of phenomena, of momentary phenomena, moment by moment by moment by moment. And that is freedom. That is release. That is freedom from any kind of ignorance, of delusion, of misunderstanding of what's really happening. But you have to train it, right? You have to learn how to be able to see it with that kind of clarity. And without adding anything else or turning away from anything. So the practice can be quite simple, quite simple. But it's going to take some effort. It's going to take some intention. It's going to take some training of the mind. And then, like Bahia, you can wake up. Bahia wakes up. Bahia not only wakes up, but he wakes up very shortly after he receives this teaching, because he was trying, after all, despite what his family member had to say about it. He was somehow training, somehow more or less on some track that was the right track, right? He was preparing in some way. And then he was actually killed by a bull very shortly after his enlightenment. And the monastics did what they often did with the Buddha, which is they asked, well, what happened to him after his death? Because the Buddha was said to be able to see what people's karmic outcomes were. And the Buddha said, oh yes, he was a fully enlightened being. We should take care of his body just like one of the arahants, because he was an arahant. So Even Bahya didn't know where he was on the arc of practice, right? Even Bahya didn't know. But the Buddha knew that he didn't need a complicated teaching. We don't need a complicated teaching if we are able to do that training of the mind, if we are able to apply our minds with that degree of clarity. So by all means, build up your sword of mindfulness, because your sword of mindfulness is necessary for you to come and find this ability to discern without extra, right? To be able to tell the thought from the thought and the herd from the herd, right? But without adding anything more there. That's the difficulty. That right there is the rub. Because we have spent a lifetime adding on a sense of self to that activity. It's me that's hearing. It's me that's applying the mind. This is how you know when somebody's not really enlightened. Right? Even the Buddha didn't call himself a Buddha. You know that? I heard that there's some very famous teacher in California these days who's calling himself Buddha the Third. And I totally was like, really? That's a sure sign that that's actually not the case. Because even the Buddha did not call himself the Buddha. Right? Why? Because by that point, he's already beyond the title. He doesn't care. That would be a sense of self. Now, wouldn't it? So, but yeah, investigation, that time and time again, building up our capacity to discern is it's not only necessary, but it is one of the qualities that's left after awakening. Is a quality of an awakened mind. So, I wish you very sharp mindfulness, and don't get run over by any cows. At least not until after you become an arhat, okay? All right. Thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully that thread was an actual something that could be followed. But if not, I'm happy to take whatever comments or questions and reflections that you have and try to clear things up.
Thank you, Aya, for that. I thought it came together very well. It's between the sense doors meditation, that focus, and then the pattern of what you were talking about. It hung together in especially that emphasis on the not self.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I first heard that concept, just how puzzling it was, and how I fought with it. You know, I was arguing with the Buddha. I mean, here you are, you're saying, there's a self, so how can you talk about not self? Because it doesn't make sense. And not to say that I fully understand it now, but I get it much more than I did years ago. And that, so I'll stop there. I guess I'm partly talking because nobody else is. I don't want to just fill up. We can all just sit in silence. But.
Yes. Thanks for the reflection, Deborah. Yes. It is oftentimes that the concept of non-self is oftentimes something that we have some resistance to at the beginning, right? It's like, well, what do you mean? I have a body, I have a mind, I was born on such and such a day. And but just see, right? We can just sit in meditation and ask yourself, is there anything that looks permanent to you? Is there anything that looks eternal in what you're seeing in your meditation? Even the consciousness, even the consciousness. So this is Allison for folks online.
Right. What about awareness versus consciousness?
Yeah. So the Buddha speaks about consciousness in many different ways, right? One way that he speaks about consciousness is something like a stream. Yeah. And that is, I think, easier to relate to, right? That we feel like there's a stream. We talk about literally streams of consciousness, right? Like something happened in the past, and then I'm thinking about something else now, and then, maybe tomorrow I'll be thinking about X, and we have this sense of it moving forward. But then there's the way of speaking about consciousness, which we see in both the five aggregates and the six sense bases. So there, consciousness is a field of awareness. And I would say, so the two things are simultaneous. The two words are synonyms. But the question for us as practitioners becomes, I think, there's a sense of a personal consciousness, and then when nibbana is seen, or sometimes it can happen for people if they're practicing jhana states, and the body falls off, and the mind becomes very, very quiet. Then suddenly there's also a sense of like, it's not a personal consciousness. It is more like an awareness, which is not, you could say, kind of colored by my particular history, right? So in the Zen tradition, there's this famous koan question about what's your original face before your parents were born, and that's what that's pointing at. That's pointing at this awareness or this consciousness. What is the awareness that is able to be present for nibbana if all things have fallen off, right? But there's still something that knew that there was that. But it doesn't have that personal quality. It doesn't have the mother and father part. So, and that's why I think that he breaks it down in that way when he talks about what ultimately in the Abhidhamma becomes called mind moments, right? So these kind of, when contact is happening, there's a particular kind of like a wave in the mind, in the consciousness that is colored by that sensation, and so that gives us a little bit of the sense of that stream is actually kind of like we used to talk about lights when I was a little girl. I don't know much about physics, I would be honest. But light is a wave, but light is also particles, right? And so that is also a very, I think, very skillful way to think about the way that the Buddha spoke about consciousness. That sometimes he was talking about it as a wave, but many times he's also actually talking about it in terms of like individual particles that have, a moment of persistence, and that's it. And then boom, there's the next one. I don't know if all that helps in regard to awareness, but.
So would you think of awareness more as the wave?
Well,
or as the field in which consciousness arises?
Well, so I think consciousness is the field, is the awareness, the knowing itself. Consciousness is the knowing itself, and the knowing itself can feel like a field, it can feel like a stream, it can feel like individual moments of particles. It's just a question of, most of the time, I would say, it is a question of how quickly our mind is moving, how much activity is actually happening, right? So the slower that you're going, the more concentrated and focused and settled the mind is. Long retreat, for example, the more you're able to see individual particles versus a big field or a stream within that field. Yeah. Hamsa?
So I was just taking in the whole consciousness thing, explanation, and so I kind of veered off there and the awareness, and it just made me think of when you're talking about the particles, like the kalapas, is that's kind of like referring to the kalapas? I mean, I've heard that reference, but that's not really that important. It's just another concept and another word. But I just wanted to thank you for okay, yeah, I see.
I don't know. I don't know what the kalapas is. I don't recognize that word. The khandas, you mean?
No, the kalapas. I think it was Goenka, S.N. Goenka had talked about that way back when. It just something that just kind of showed up when you mentioned the particles.
Not a word that's familiar to me, so now I'll have to
Yeah.
go look it up.
Yeah. But I'm so glad you just read from the Bahia story. I that's one of my very, very favorite stories. And as a matter of fact, I thought, a couple of weeks ago, I said, I need to just make a copy. And I'm not one to memorize things, but it just is so succinct.
Mhm.
And so I made the copy. It's on my desk, and it's like, if I just need to have that, and then it's there. That's it.
Mhm.
Really, and I just love how you presented that, and how you say, I've heard other people pronounce it Bahia, but you do it so flowing and poetically.
Bahia, yeah,
Bahia.
because at least the versions that I have in the Pali, yeah, there's a micron over that first A, so that makes that little one that slightly longer.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it took me to a couple more levels deeper with getting in touch with not me, not mine, uh, the anatta, as you were taking us through this. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Mhm. Thanks, Buddha.
I just wanted to add one more thing, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, one more thing. And that was such an inspiration when you shared with the metta. Because I've been kind of connecting with different friends, because I'm here now in Virginia and left Minnesota, and people have a certain upset over the last week, and what I just have said is, I decided to practice more intentional loving kindness and compassion, rather than going down any kind of storylines with what's happening. And so you've inspired me when I think about 16 times now, just stay on that track. So again, thank you.
Sadhu, sadhu. Yes, definitely. I always recommend lots of metta, lots and lots of metta. I mean, anything that is that joyful and that bright and that clear and that, kind of squeezing out all of the hindrances and all of the other muck for even an instant is huge. It's huge. So helpful. Right. There's that other sutta in which the Buddha says that practicing metta for the amount of time that it takes to pull a cow's udder, it was more valuable than, 84,000 gold coins offered to, I don't know how many Buddhas and Arhants or whatever. Now, I've never pulled a cow's udder, but I hear That takes about that much time. I just thought that was very funny. But those are the, time references they had back then. So it's memorable, at least. Memorable. Yes, Patrick, please.
I didn't realize ruminants came up so often in the suttas here.
Yeah.
I love the Bahia story, and he was right to pester the Buddha because the bull might have gotten him if he hadn't gotten that teaching, right? Especially after your dead cousin comes and tells you, it's like, buddy, seize the day. Yeah, right. But I was wondering though, like I find I'm searching for a healthy personal relationship with intention. Because to me, the relationship I have with it, there's a lot of selfing in intention. And I'm wondering if I'll put you in the position of the Buddha, right? If the Buddha gives Bahia this instruction, and I don't remember the phrase exactly, but it was like, it was something like, in the seeing, let there just be the seeing. Not, he didn't say not a seer. I don't remember it, but it was to observe the artificial introduction of a self in this process that doesn't inherently have a self in it, seeing, right? Or hearing, or I forgot what the third one was. But what about intention? Like if when an intention, I think of intention and I think of, well, I am going to set an intention or something like that. There's almost always a self in there. How does one, how do you experience intention without the self?
So this is there's two approaches to this, and I'll tell you the first one, which I think is probably the easier of the two. So we oftentimes we talk about well, I don't know if you know the metaphors. So let me do it this way. The idea is that when let's say you have an itch in your knee, right? That is happening without a self. And we could pretty much say, sure, I'll give you that. Right? It's just a set of causes and conditions that happens. There's a mind that knows it, and I don't have to own that thing necessarily, right? And the same thing is true of an intention, actually. That there isn't necessarily, so an intention is just a particular kind of thought, and thoughts are required in order to know the itch in the knee, too, right? That same set of, you could say, mental faculties is being engaged. It's just that a thought is knowing a thought, right? Or consciousness is knowing a thought. So this is why the five aggregates is actually this framework of the body and the four types of mental experience is what the Buddha said to pay attention to once you had your mind sharp enough to use that as a way to sort of keep studying, like, okay, what is it, so that you can see that there isn't a self, even in the things that we think there is a self, like intention. That said, I will also say this. If your intention is to know truth, to be in harmony with truth, then is there a self in there too? It's just truth. It's just you are by definition in harmony with that thing. You're just discovering it. You're just allowing that to be your lived reality, in a sense. Do you see what I'm saying? So if the intention is something that is specifically going against that, then you will see that there is a self, and there is this thing I call rope burn, right? Which is what happens when we cling to something, which is by definition wrong or by definition impermanent, right? But if the intention is to be in harmony, or to actually realize what's true about what's here, then again, if there's no self here, if there were a self here, then okay, it would show up. But if there's no self here, if that's really what's true about what's here, then there's no self in that intention either. Yeah. So for this reason, the Buddha said, you could think about the perceptions that we have as being like a mirage in the desert, you know. It's like there is some material, physical, energetic phenomena that's happening that we call this thing, that we call Patrick, that we call Dhammadipa, that we call Deborah, that we call Allison, and all of you folks who are online, Amsa, Emily, Susan. Nino, right? There is some material and energetic phenomena that's happening, but it isn't what we think it is. There isn't actually water there in the mirage, right? It's a mirage. If you get close enough, and that's why the metaphor is so beautiful, right? If the mind gets close enough to phenomena with clarity, then we see, oh yeah, there's no self there, just like there was no water there. It doesn't mean that there wasn't the things that caused us to think there was water. Those things are happening, right? There is this, you know, earth, air, fire, and water stuff happening. But there's no water in the mirage, and there's no self here. So if your intention is to find out what's true, then you will see. That there's no self in that intention either.
I did just a follow-up
Sure, yep.
It's right here.
Okay. The
So-
little round part, yeah, that's it.
So when the Buddha said that it's important to have an intention,
Mhm.
one should not interpret that as an injunction, as in thou shalt have an intention, because that would infer a separate self. Is the right interpretation of that? No? Okay. So is the interpretation though that if there is that sense of intentionality, that there is that you're likely but it's really hard to put into words. That there's a skillfulness involved at that point, if there is a sense of intentionality.
Okay, but I think again, Patrick, it's like this. It's like the Buddha said you need to have an intention to practice
Mhm.
because that is activating karma in a particular way that creates these wholesome states, and then it gets its kind of, you know, momentum.
Mhm.
That more wholesome states lead to more wholesome states until awakening is possible. But again, there isn't the act of creating an intention. It feels like there is a self, like there is a person who says, I'm going to do that, right? But that also is just an idea, and it is an idea that functions equally as blindly, you could say, as the pain in the knee.
Mm.
So just keep looking and asking, is there anything permanent in there? Is there anything independent? So, and this is the important thing, is that we think somehow that that intention is somehow separate, right? That intention is somehow separate from reality, and we sort of stick a new thing into reality. But it's just another set of causes and conditions. It happens to be a set of causes and conditions that we chose, right? That's important because of, again, the karmic functioning behind it. But just keep looking and you will see that even that doesn't have any kind of permanent independent self. It is all equally working according to those things. So, but we do it because of that, because of the karma of it. That's the real reason, that, you know, the short answer. Because because you need to get karma on your side, so to speak. You need to engage karma in a way that's helping rather than hurting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll just close because we're over our time now. Thanks everyone for your reflections, questions, your presence in your practice, and your supports in many, many ways. May all beings benefit from our practice. May all beings realize absolute clarity and peace in their hearts and their minds. May we know the truths of our lives by the power of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and each one's efforts. May all beings be liberated. All right, friends, I had fun with the discussion this time. So many ruminants to talk about.
Thank you, Dhammadipa. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
Wonderful.